voters have spoken, at least the 20% of us who actually showed up and voted. And Albuquerque's mayor is Richard Dave Berry. He's took that seat again, 68% of the vote, actually negating the need for a runoff. However, he may face a more Democratic city council despite receiving unprecedented donations for a council race. Roxana Myers was defeated by Ike Benton and soundly. And at the time of our taping here, there remains a possibility of a runoff in District 7. If there is a runoff in November, voters will also weigh in on that proposed ban on late-term abortions. If there is no runoff, the city plans a mail-in vote on that issue, a question forced by a petition drive. Now, Senator, what's your take on the turnout, meaning the amount of people that showed up and who won? And the betting money was a low turnout would benefit Mr. Berry. Is that exactly how this turned out for him, or was there something else at work here?
Well, I think the low turnout always benefits the Republicans. And it always amuses me to hear people describe Albuquerque as a Democratic city, because that's true in general elections. But we're talking about city council elections or school board elections or smaller elections where there's 20% of the vote that turns out. Well, that really evens the playing field. And it's no longer, what is it, 45 to 29 or something like that. But it's 50-50, or maybe even tilted more toward the Republicans. So I think that, you know, that's part of it. Of course, Mayor Berry won a landslide. Even in the North Valley, which rarely votes for a Republican, he carried the precincts around my home, and he carried precincts around Griegos. Not by much, but that was a first in my memory.
That's interesting. Again, touch on that, Rob. 68% is a heck of a number. It's really
especially I think President Obama won Albuquerque by 17%. And then have Richard Berry, you know, a nominal Republican. I mean, it's supposed to be, you know, a nonpartisan race, but to have Richard Berry win with 68%, that's very impressive. But as you mentioned, I mean, it's a bit tempered because of the possible runoff for Janice Arnold-Jones' seat. And if there is a runoff there, you can believe, you know, there is no doubt the Democrats will try to influence that race as much as possible to get Ms. Gibson in instead of Ms. Arnold-Jones, because that would tilt the power base in the city council from 5-4 Republican to 5-4 Democrat, and that would have a major impact on what Mr. Berry can do down the road.
Interesting. Rachel, you know, staying on that race for a second, you know, she came in with 39% of the vote and was going to sneak into that runoff. But she's a very different candidate suddenly because of that. Now all those things, those forces to bear that Rob's talking about, all the Democratic stuff's going to come, the wind behind her back. Is this a winnable race? I mean, is this something that's going to be, you know, can you close that kind of gap just because it's a runoff? You see what I'm saying? It's a healthy gap to make up there.
The runoff factor in this election was really interesting. I was surprised to see going along such a number of attack ads on Dinelli, and I wondered if the influence of the possibility of a runoff was influencing maybe more of that kind of spending by some of the candidates than usual. It's a very interesting factor. It didn't end up playing a role in the mayoral side of things, but definitely could end up playing a big role in this other race.
You know, in that District 2 race that Senator Feldman was just mentioning, where Ike Benton did quite well, despite having an opponent with seemingly all the money in the world at her disposal.
Independent.
Independent. That's true. Independent money. That's right. That's true. What are we to make of that spread, though, Rachel? You know what I mean? Was that a rejection vote? I wonder if people were turned off by the approach of that kind of money in a city council race and just plain said, no, we're not going to have this?
It definitely, I think it probably caught a lot of people by surprise, since it's not the kind of thing that we've seen a lot of in Albuquerque council races. I think it maybe took some people aback.
Definitely. My mailbox is happy, I'll tell you that. I can actually get other things in there. It's just really interesting. Trip, you know, again, the mayoral stuff is interesting to me because Mr. Berry, think about any politician, you get 51%, you think it's a mandate. They all do it, right? 68%, however, that's a mandate.
So
isn't it? I mean, doesn't he have a clear
I think so.
Now?
But you know, there are several things that were in his factor. I think he had twice the amount of money. That, you know, more than 700,000, as I recall.
880,000.
So that does help. You spread the money around, and frankly, when you're an incumbent, and when you know, there were a lot of where he was featured. positive ads. That's always a sign that you're in control. The negative ads usually, they typically mean that someone's trying to erode into someone's lead. I covered him a little bit in the legislature. He is a nice guy. He seems genuine. That sells well. That's a good narrative. It's easy to sell that kind of like story.
Right. Let me ask you this. What could Peter Dinelli done differently? Was there anything? He came out early against the plan, the Bosky plan. That didn't quite get traction. He came out later with, the airport. That didn't quite get there. The plan. There were a lot of efforts that didn't quite get there. Could he have done anything different, honestly?
With the amount of money that he had, one can always second guess. I think a really big issue, and he did, some of the ads really did harp on this, but this federal investigation with the APD is kind of it's going to be an interesting moment in Albuquerque history when the result of that comes down. Now, I don't know if that would have sold well because, frankly, those of us around the table, we pay attention to this stuff. I think a lot of people just really, they're voting their pocketbook, and really, there's nothing that Barry has done that has really catastrophically affected the population.
Exactly.
I mean,
Senator, it's hard for me to picture any mayor not having 2 terms in a row. You'd have to really have something scandalous happen, it seems to me. It's such a power position in this city. Does that make sense to you, or is there a way to chop at it if you're a challenger with the money constraints and all that kind of stuff?
Well, we've tried public financing, and here, it's a voluntary system, so, this time the mayor didn't take public financing, although as a challenger he did, and I think that's telling.
Yeah. Yep.
And of course, I think we had term limits for the mayor, and then we did away with term limits for the mayor. And then you got these, skipping the sessions, like Harry Kinney, for example, was mayor, and then he skipped one, and then he was mayor again.
Like Grover Cleveland?
And like Bruce King. But, I think the runoff has changed things a little bit. The public financing has changed things a little bit.
Was there a difference in your mind by not getting that anti-abortion issue on the ballot?
Oh,
Would that have
yes.
changed things markedly?
That was voter suppression, I believed.
Interesting.
The slow ball tactics of the city clerk had to have something to do with the administration not wanting that on the general election ballot. And had it been on the general election ballot, it could have been a different picture. I don't know whether the Republic would have benefited the Republicans or the Democrats, but it would have brought out many more voters.
Yeah. Interesting.
well, I just want to say that energizes certain populations, and that's what you're talking about. It could be Republicans getting out to support it, or it could be protest votes coming out. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about.
And that's something that's going to be the overlay on this possible runoff.
Definitely.
Because Janice Hartnell-Jones is known as a person who's more of a fiscal person, not really a social conservative.
Right.
I mean, does that help her? Does that hurt her? Does it help the Democrat? Does it hurt the Democrats? Because I think the polling shows 54% of people would be in favor of a 20-week limit on abortion. But, I mean, that's so polarizing. It's going to bring money and emotion into this thing. And I agree with Senator Feldman. I mean, I think Mayor Barry wanted that thing away during this
way away
because there was no upside there.
Yeah, interesting. Just ahead, we look at the very first week for the new health insurance exchanges. See what they do to me? I tried. I couldn't get on the phone. And the line goes on the clock.